Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a microlender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Well, good day, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Laura Reid. Having grown up with a stutter, social anxiety, and an aversion to putting on pants, she is an unlikely international keynote speaker, public speaking coach, and stand-up comedian. But that's what makes her uniquely aligned to help others break through public speaking fear and leave audiences spellbound. Laura, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And it's funny when you're reading that, I'm realizing I'm actually wearing my pajama pants, but no one knows. Gotta love Zoom.
Isn't that, when you're in the world of Zoom and you're doing meetings, you're like business up top and party down below. So
it's so good.
So tell me a little bit about your story, because obviously you've become a very successful international speaker and coach, and you've written an amazing book entitled The Public Speaking Horror Show. And so we're going to dive into that. But tell us a little bit about your story and what has made you so successful.
Absolutely. I think success is really how you measure kind of your joy in life for me. Yes. And I do take so much joy now in being a speaker, helping others achieve their speaking dreams, being an author. However, growing up, it really was a horror show for me. I used to think a monster actually lived in my throat. And when I would try to speak, someone would ask me a question, which I always dreaded. It would wake up and it would just consume my words and kind of take my breath. Yeah. And growing up as a child, my stutter could be quite severe to the point where I would have to kind of stomp my foot to try to force a word out of my mouth. And I went through years of speech therapy to become a more fluid speaker. And although I did achieve, this level of fluency with my speech, that shame that I felt, the embarrassment, that humiliation growing up, it's like that got baked into my nervous system. Yep. And I struggled as an adult with just this, crippling public speaking fear and, social anxiety even. Yeah. So it wasn't until, really about 15 years ago that I was able to overcome that. And then I realized I'd spent my whole life like learning how to overcome speaking fear and learn to be a speaker too. And I had almost this obligation I felt to help others as well.
Excellent. So what was one of the key things that you implemented or learned or strategies to help you overcome?
Well, I'm always looking for signs from the universe, signs from God, and sometimes it comes in the form of a literal sign. And about 15 years ago, I had been in a teacher staff training. I remember it was my first job back to school or back to work as a teacher. My son was about 2, and I really needed that job. And in the staff training, I saw the word on the agenda that I dreaded most of all: introductions. And that meant we're going around the room having to speak in front of people.
Right.
And as I got closer and closer to my turn to speak, I started having these like crazy extreme symptoms, like really nauseous. I thought I was going to pass out. I couldn't breathe. And I didn't realize it really in that moment. It was really later that I realized I was having a panic attack.
Yeah.
Just from the prospect of like having to say my name, introduce myself in front of others. I ended up leaving the room, going home sick, like really ashamed, not sick. But I knew that day something had to change or I wasn't going to be able to even work. And I happened to be walking downtown. I passed this flyer, this literal sign. It's for a storytelling competition. And it was this crazy moment where it was just like, you have to enter. And this voice in my head was like, are you crazy? You're terrified of speaking. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm crazy, because I can't keep living this way. It's exhausting to live in fear. So for the first time in my life, I ran towards my fear and I embraced who I was. I embraced growing up with that stutter. I told my story on a stage. And the weird thing was I found this sense of peace in doing that, being on the stage. I don't know what it was, but it was exhilarating to me. And afterwards, all these other people came up and they were inspired to be vulnerable and share their stories. So I won that competition and that really boosted my confidence. And I entered more and more competitions. I got really into speaking and that's what really launched it. What I learned most from that is that sometimes what you fear will set you free.
Yeah, you talk about that in your book. I remember reading a book recently called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's basically the same principle, is that the very thing that you are afraid of or the largest problem that you have in your life is actually your way to breakthrough. And so by facing or dealing with not going around, not burying your head in the sand, not trying to get away from it, but just accepting it, confronting it, facing it, getting support, putting yourself out there to have to deal with it, that becomes the way to break through, to go to another level of living. And I'm sure since that time of going through that and winning that competition and winning others, your life changed and your life was never the same.
It completely changed my life. It changed my career, led me to where I am right now. In some ways, I even met, my soulmate, who's my husband right now. We met in a speaking competition. So I feel like it, you never know, like those steps that you take, where it's going to lead, and I can't imagine if I hadn't done that. I think about just hiding away, living in that exhaustion, the stress physically that living with some kind of anxiety creates within your body, what that would have led to in my life. I shudder to think about that.
Wow. What a great story. What a great story. So I have 2 questions for you that I've started asking my guests. And that is, what is your favorite style or genre of music?
I am a lover of music. I can't sing worth a lick, but I do anyway. I don't care who's listening. And I really love almost all music. However, I'd have to say it's really like 1970s, like folk style music. I think it's because I grew up with that. My mom was always playing Joan Baez and, Cat Stevens, those kind of songs. And when they come on the radio, it just fills my heart to this day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And can you share a piece of music that has inspired you or that deeply resonates with you? Like, what's one song that you listen to that kind of takes you back or puts you in a place that you go, wow, that's amazing?
Yeah, the song that always takes me back is Cat Stevens' Wild World. Like, my mom played that song all the time, and I just grew up hearing it. And to this day, when I'm feeling a little blue or down, like I play that song and I know every word. When my son was little, instead of like traditional lullabies, I used to sing him Cat Stevens songs and the Beatles, and I think that sparked his love of that kind of music to this day too. But yeah, that song, those words are almost like haunting to me, but in a reassuring kind of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
Nostalgic.
Yeah, because music has a way of just embedding us and helping us and supporting us through challenging times and helping us get past things. And it also, we hear a song, it makes us cry, it makes us happy, it makes us sad, but it takes us to another place, right? It really
Absolutely.
takes us to a whole nother place, and it embodies everything that we're experiencing and makes life worth living when we go and we use music. That's why I love to be able to use music in my business and things that I get to do.
I have to share one thing because my mom she died in the end of March this year.
Okay.
And, that was a song she kind of, sang to me too. And I'm realizing the message in that, and this is a message she kind of gave me my whole life, is that, it's a wild world.
Yes.
And you've got to get by before that smile, right? You have to, and just embracing that. And now I'm realizing I sang that to my son too, that, go out into that world, because it's just wild and beautiful. Anyway, I've just had that download in my mind.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great thought. Well, listen, I want to talk to you about your book. And so obviously you have, with your own personal story and your own personal challenges, overcome and really have become an authority to be able to share even now more. I get the public speaking horror show model that you have there, because it's what you had to work through yourself and overcoming all these fears and challenges to break through, right? So I have some questions for you about the book, because I did find it really engaging. It's kind of embedded with some of the, the spookiness and ghosts and the witchcraft of, laying out your stories and things like that. And it's not about that, but it's just the craft, but you're using these words to kind of, add your own spin to it. So with that being said, how do you think the fear of public speaking impacts someone's individual workplace productivity or their career growth if they can't speak? And maybe you can share even more about that situation you went through that impacted you when you were as a teacher, just giving yourself an introduction or being able to get
Absolutely. I mean, it's a game changer. It really is. And, just a little side note on the spookiness, I grew up in what I believe is a haunted house. Like I saw a ghost it was this old mansion built in the 1800s in upstate New York. That's where I live with my parents. And so I became really fascinated with ghosts. And I always loved horror movies, even from like a very young age. Right. And I think it's because I could kind of control the fear in that way. My real life was so scary and I couldn't really control that. But when I'm watching a horror movie, it's like I'm choosing that, right? So maybe there's something there. But when we talk about the fear of public speaking, it's one of our biggest human fears. Like death is number 2, right? So it's a problem out there. It's a challenge for so many people. Yeah. The thing is, we're all public speakers in some way. I mean, I tried to hide from it for most of my life, but you really can, if you want to make any money at all, right? In any kind of job, eventually you have to speak. And communication as a skill is just that. Like public speaking is a skill that we can build upon, right? Anyone can become a really gifted communicator if they start to build on those skills. And I've seen it not only with myself, but with my clients. Like one just came to mind, actually, who was in a big networking group, and she's in a business where she is asked to speak at staff meetings and possibly give, some webinars or workshops to other people. And she was scared to death to do that. So she wouldn't even raise her hand because she didn't really want to be seen as a speaker. And I think because of that, although she was gifted in her work, she got passed over quite a bit. Yeah. And just like me, one day she realized she had to make a change. And we started working together. And, one of the first things she told me is, I hate the sound of my voice. And I remember feeling that too, when I was little. And part of my speech therapy was to listen to myself back. And I despise that. Of course, we sound different, right? When we hear our voices back. But I remember telling her, speak to yourself like you would a loved one. Like,
Right.
would you say that I hate the sound of your voice to your children? Right. So she started kind of changing the language that she used just for herself.
Yeah.
And we ended up crafting some, her story. Her story was so powerful about why she did what she did. She was a financial advisor for a bigger company. And it
Okay.
dated back to overhearing her parents argue about money and eventually getting divorced because of that. And so when we crafted her story and she started to own it, one day she ended up telling that story in a workshop in front of people in an audience. It was a game changer for her. Like
Right.
she said she got the biggest applause. She couldn't believe it. Everyone was coming up to her afterwards. And she began that journey of starting to enjoy speaking, but also starting to like the sound of her own voice.
Yeah.
And it's really an act of self-love.
Right.
And that can change everything.
Exactly.
And, now she's getting more and more opportunities as well.
When you have that challenge in your life or some major obstacle or difficulty that you've gone through or you've experienced, and you craft a story around it and you share that with people, it makes you so much more relatable. Because if you're up on stage and it seems like everything is perfect, then no one can relate to you. But as soon as you share your flaws and your challenges and the difficulties that you've had to overcome and how you're still working through, you're still a work in progress, if you will, but you're just leveraging the courage to face that challenge, it becomes a game changer because now it resonates with people, right? It's like watching a good movie when the great sound of a great movie is within seconds, the hero of the movie, things are going great, and all of a sudden he has this major tragedy, and the rest of the movie is them coming back and rebuilding and redoing, right? It's like we love those movies because it's like, oh, it's so great. Oh my God, look what happened. And then at the next 2 hours, this person's trying to rebuild their life. And you're going, I can relate to that so much. I cried.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's no other form of communication like storytelling that really creates that kind of empathy and helps us, remember and puts ourselves in the place of the speaker. And when you use that, no matter what your topic is, there are ways to tell stories and, wrap some stories around some of those facts and data you might be sharing. It's going to be memorable because if everyone's going to forget what you said, what's the point? Right. We want people to remember, to relate to what we're saying, to be inspired by what we're saying.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And stories definitely help us to remember because our brains think in pictures. And as soon as we hear stories, we begin to visualize the picture of that story and we encode it differently in our minds. So we remember stories so much better than facts in that way.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this question. Many professionals spend a lot of time preparing for presentations due to this fear of public speaking. How can this time be optimized to improve their productivity while addressing these fears? In other words, what are some things they can do to really prepare and not just over prepare, but to really prepare to tell their story in a way that helps improve their productivity?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is so true, especially for, I think, professionals that are used to putting a lot of time maybe into PowerPoints, like focusing on the information. So what I would, and focusing maybe a bit on themselves, like thinking about how I'm going to sound, how I'm going to be perceived, right? I would start with throwing that all out the window and start with, I love the speaking model that's called think, feel, do, right? And what you're doing is focusing more on the audience first. Who is that audience you're planning to speak to? And then what do you want them to think about? Right? Or what do you want them to feel? Do you want them to be motivated, inspired? And what do you want them to do? Like, what's that call to action that you really want? And sometimes it's not selling a thing. It might just be changing their mindset about something, right? Thinking about something in a new way. So if you can start there, and answer those questions first, then that really helps guide you to what I want in my clients is to come up with the essence of what their main topic, their theme, like their reoccurring motif in their speech really is going to be. If they can boil that down to a sentence, even 3 words, right? Then, for me, it might be find your voice, whatever that is. they've got that mantra to kind of go from, and then they can think about, okay, what's a story from my life? It doesn't even necessarily have to be about them. It might be someone they worked with, something that happened to them that fits with that theme, that topic or message they want to share with everyone, that's going to make them feel and do the things they want to do. And then they can build in some teaching around that, and then do their slides last if they need them at all. And remember that the slides are really supporting what you're going to say in a vivid, engaging way. They shouldn't be everything you're going to say.
Exactly.
Right. And you should have as little slides as possible.
Yeah.
And it's harder. We use it as a crutch, of course. We can read along with our slides. But how boring is that for the audience, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've had the pleasure of being coached by Les Brown, and I did a book with him. And it's amazing if you study his speeches. There's no PowerPoint presentation. It's like, there's like maybe one or two video recordings of him ever using a PowerPoint. But what he did use was stories. And he used them in a way where, as he told a story, he would change his voice for the different characters in the story of his life. And he would change positions on the stage. He would change his tone or his pitch. And pretty soon you're caught up in the story and you're visualizing this scenario. And in every one of our own ways, we're kind of recreating this image that he's created for us in our own way. And we're seeing ourselves in that story. And so I love that idea of think, feel, do to prepare for your storytelling or prepare your presentations, and not so much rely on PowerPoint and bullet points, because again, people are going to remember the stories that you tell. Even if it's a story that you tell in a business meeting, just a really short snippet of a story before you make a point, people will remember that more than the point that you make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I've been invited to speak a couple of places, especially when it's virtual. And they're like, oh, can you submit your slides? I'm like, oh, I don't have any. They're like,
like, what?
Oh, like there's always this awkward pause. But then it ends up being people love it. They use the chat more. I'm asking more questions.
Right.
Another tip that I have is not to think of your presentation really as a presentation. Think of it as a conversation with this audience. And when you're in an engaging conversation like we are right now, you're asking questions, you're sharing stories, you're listening back and forth. And that's going to be so much more engaging for the audience.
It's
and they're going
like
to ultimately
jazz,
get a lot out of it.
It's kind of like playing jazz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, totally. I love that metaphor.
Excellent. Excellent. Number 4 here. What are some common productivity traps that people fall into when they have overly focused on perfecting their public speaking skills? And how can they avoid them?
Such a good question. Perfection just stifles our own creativity, and there's no achieving it. So I wish there wasn't even a thing, right? Like, because it doesn't really exist.
Right.
And the more I think we focus on that, the less we're going to enjoy what we're saying. And what happens is we all kind of have different ideas of what perfection looks like for us when we're speaking, right? And in general, for most people, they want to be able to remember every word they wanted to share. That's a really high bar. If you're focusing your productivity, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to memorize this. What happens in real time when you're in front of that audience, it's always a little different vibe, right? And you might get a little nervous. And if you forget that next word that you memorized, it's going to throw off the whole thing. So what I recommend is, first of all, letting yourself off the hook, knowing that, it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
And be grateful for anything that goes a little awry, any mistakes that you might have made. It's going to teach you something. But if you see it, like you said, visualize your talk in different, in pictures, almost like a story arc. It's like, okay, I'm starting here. Here's what I can visualize for this. And then I'm doing this teaching, and just have that in your head. If something you do forget in the moment, you can always kind of circle back and weave it around, and know this. no one in the audience, not a single person will
No.
know. Right. They don't know. And those
Exactly.
little mistakes, like for me, if I do, stutter a little, or, I say something different than how I wanted, I'm perceiving it as a mistake, those to come off totally polished is really not authentic. And no one wants to hear you recite a speech, right? You want to be able to feel the words, and it just makes us more authentic. It's so much better. I have to share this. So I was in Toastmasters for a long time and
Sure.
competed in those
Yep.
speech contests. And for that, they really do recommend, at least for winning a speech contest, you have to be as polished as you can, because someone, usually I say, remember, no one's judging you. Well, in that case, I'm literally being judged, and people are counting every and on, like I say, that type of thing. Right. But then when I did some stand-up comedy for the first time, and I was working with a coach to help me with that, and she said, Laura, you've got to unlearn all these things that you learned, because, for stand-up, she's like, okay, that's a really funny story, but it's not stand-up. You need to be raw. You need to throw out this idea that you can't say any filler words, or, you need to be able to engage spontaneously with the audience. So it's kind of cool. I had to unlearn so much of what I learned in Toastmasters, even though I value that time so much. So there's different, you got to kind of know the venue too and what you're doing. But somewhere in the middle there is like a good spot to be, I think.
Exactly. And speaking of coaching, one of my favorite quotes that I've actually crafted myself, I have to say that one, because I was asked by someone about mentoring and coaching, because as a musician, you grow up and you develop yourself to a point, and then you go, okay, how do I go to the next level? Right? Because you've gone as far as you can go by yourself. So what do? You hire a teacher, right? A music teacher who's going to show you scales and models and mindsets and things that you've never learned how to do before. You just talked about, you went to a coach because you had become a professional speaker. You had been trained by Toastmasters, but now you're trying a different genre of speaking, which is stand-up comedy. And what did you have to do? You went to a coach. How important was finding that coach to the acceleration of your success using comedy with your speaking than if you were to try to do it by yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. We all need help. And, I'm an entrepreneur, we can be very isolated when we own our we're solopreneur, right? And I used to think I really didn't need other people. I could just watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and I could, read all the books about it, and I could figure it out. But working with another person that's already succeeding in that is so important, to get that feedback, have someone tell you honestly, not, my friends would say, oh, you're great. Awesome. We love, because they love me already. But having someone like that who could just tell me, Laura, oh boy, no, you're not ready. And we worked and worked. And the funny thing is, I had it in my head, I have to do stand up. I had never done an open mic before, nothing. And don't consider myself especially funny, like especially my teenage son wasn't saying it's anything I should do.
Yeah. You're killing me. I'm just falling off the chair.
Right. And so it was amazing, because she worked with me until she said, you're ready. And then I thought she was just going to have me do an open mic, but no, she booked me. I thought it was going to be kind of a small venue as post-COVID, but turned out post-COVID, everybody was like dying to get out.
Yes.
And it was this local kind of nightclub in Kona. I live on Big Island, Hawaii, right? And it was packed. It was like over 100 people. And as soon as I walked in, I was dying. I was like, I wanted to turn around and just run, right? I was terrified. But I got up there with these other like gifted comics, right? And I did it. People laughed, and it was exhilarating. But if I hadn't worked with her first, oh gosh, like, I don't know. And I have bombed before since then, and I've had that feeling too. But working with a coach is important.
But the biggest thing is that Steve Harrison, who worked with Jack Canfield, always would say, you have to stumble forward, right? The idea of perfection is just, a bad idea. You just have to ready, fire, aim, right? You can't sit there and aim. You gotta just fire. Then you aim and you fire again and you aim again. And you just keep trying until you figure it out. And many times that's kind of what you have to do. This has
I
been
have this, I have this I have this chapter in the book. It's called Dare to Suck, or maybe it's
Yeah.
just a tip.
Yeah.
Right. And especially with comedy, it's the one thing where you kind of have to be bad at first before you get better, and just learn all that. And then speaking of coaches, like I'm working with Steve Harrison right now. Like
Oh, wow.
he's my coach, to help me with other goals that I have.
Yeah,
and
he's an amazing coach.
Yeah, it doesn't matter like where you are, and you're like working with someone, investing in yourself is so important. Like, I don't think I'll ever get there where I'm like, okay, I'm good. I am at this most successful time in my life, right? There's always growth. There's always more goals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I met Harvey McKay, and this was in 2015, and he was 80 years old. And I met him at a National Speakers Association meeting. And he was telling me, we were kind of talking about his book, Swimming with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive. And he goes, and I said, so how are you, I don't know, somehow I asked him about his life and coaching. And he goes, oh, I have a speaking coach. This guy's 80 years old and multimillionaire, owns a professional team. He goes, I have a speaking coach. I have a cooking coach. I have a golf coach. I have a yoga and Pilates and stretch coach. I mean, he named about 5 or 6 coaches that he has, but he looked like he was in his 70s.
Wow.
And he was full of life. And that just had such a major impact on me to see here's someone who's 80 years old and they still want to be coached.
I love that.
Right.
And you said full of life.
Exactly.
Like that's what keeps you full of life, right?
Exactly. So a couple more questions here. What practical tips from your book can help people become more efficient in their public speaking preparation and allowing them to balance their essential tasks and responsibilities for being a great speaker, but also for balancing their own energy and mindset?
I love that, right? That's a productivity. Whenever people say they're busy, I'm always like, no, you're not busy. You're being productive, right?
Right.
And I think being productive means putting the right energy into the right things, like not hyper focusing on things that are going to drain you, but really what you're feeling most motivated about. And, here's one of my tips that because a lot of times if we do have some nervousness approaching our tasks when it comes to getting on a stage and speaking, whatever we've been asked to do, we do let that nervousness kind of consume us for a bit. And my biggest tip that someone could use right away is something like you're not going to see it out there. It's kind of counterintuitive, especially in today's culture. Most people say you have to step out or break out of your comfort zone in order to achieve this thing, right? And what I say is that's not true. What I believe is that you can stay in it because if you get in touch with how you feel authentically in your comfort zone, I mean, think about it. We feel our most relaxed, calm, confident, like we can just be ourselves, our authentic selves, right? With our own real voice, right? And if you kind of conjure up all those feelings, get in touch with them. And then as you're about to step on that stage or, unmute yourself or whatever it is to do the speaking, you just expand that feeling and your comfort zone out to include the scary thing that you're doing. For me, it was a game changer. When we're telling ourselves, oh, I'm going to do this scary thing. I got to fake it till I make it, which is my least favorite saying. I'm breaking out of my comfort zone. What happens, there's all science behind this. Our brains kind of start to freak out and they get in that nervous brain mode. And guess what happens? When we're in that mode, we forget our words. All the nervous symptoms start to creep up, right? It's exactly what we don't want when we're speaking. So to all your listeners out there, embrace your comfort zone and allow yourself permission to stay there. Instead of saying, I'm going to be confident, just be calm, be yourself, right? Embrace like all those feelings that make you, you. And that way your authentic voice is going to shine. And that's the most productive thing that you can do.
Excellent. Excellent. Laura, if people want to learn more about you, work with you, get your books, your programs, where can they go?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So if you go to my website, which is www.thespeechslayer.com, you can sign up for a free 20-minute talk story with me if you're interested in just learning more about speaking coaching, or I'll just give you some tips for free, so feel free to sign up for that. I also have a free mini course, which is called The 7 Deadly Sins of Public Speaking, where it's just about 10 minutes where I'm telling you all the things not to do, which often we don't talk about as much.
Right.
My book is available on Amazon and also on barnesandnoble.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Laura, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. And I would definitely recommend your book, The Public Speaking Horror Show. You will be engaged, empowered. The tips and the strategies that you share in the book are really compelling, and they have a nice flavor spin on them in a way that allows you to embrace them. And it shows you to be who you say you are as your authentic self. So thank you for sharing yourself. And also for, I think in the book, it has a picture of you, struggling with, as a little girl, putting on your pants.
Yep. We just get that out of the way right from the start. Yeah. And that's still who I am today.
I'm being totally vulnerable here, right out of the gate.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a delightful conversation, really meaningful. I appreciate you.
If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.